A jersey that hangs from the rafters by itself is really just a piece of clothing. More important is the story of the man who wore it. This story begins in Kaunas, Lithuania, with a young boy by the name of Zydrunas Ilgauskas. Like the rest of the country, basketball was his religion. Despite what his height as a kid would suggest, Zydrunas grew to be one of Lithuania's top players. By the time he was in high school, he began playing professionally, and in 1994, on a United States tour, played the University of Kentucky.
We're watching some Kentucky film, and they were playing the Lithuanian team, and I noticed this big guy on the Lithuanian team was pretty good. I liked his footwork and his shooting touch and his ability to score around the basket. I said to our scouts, I said, well, the best player I've seen in this film so far is that big tall guy on the Lithuanian team, who happened to be
Zydrunas Ilgauskas.
A wealth of promise accompanied the 7'3" center, but so did risk.
We weren't quite sure how serious the injuries were, but it was worth the risk at the 20th in the draft.
With the 20th pick in the 1996 NBA draft, the Cleveland Cavaliers select Zydrunas Ilgauskas from Lithuania.
Just like that, General Manager Wayne Embry of the Cleveland Cavaliers surprised the NBA world. He chose two international big men in the first round, Ukrainian Vitaly Potapenko with the 12th pick, and Ilgauskas with the 20th.
That year he was drafted with Vitaly, but Vitaly was like very outgoing and gregarious and like easy to be friendly with, whereas Zydrunas is a little bit more staid, like a little bit more reserved, so I never really knew what to make of him.
Soon, Zydrunas would find out what to make of himself. Just a few short months later, he broke a bone in his right foot, sidelining him before ever playing a game.
That's really how we became, as close of friends, because he wasn't traveling with the team.
We didn't know that he'd ever play. A lot of what he went through was unprecedented.
Foot problems and surgeries cost Ilgauskas 2 of his first 4 seasons and all but 5 games of a third. The only bright spot, a 1998 All-Rookie First-Team selection and Rookie Game Most Valuable Player award. Eventually, Ilgauskas opted for radical reconstruction on his left foot.
He's relentless. He decides something and he goes at it. So not that he didn't have his moments, but it seemed like he's like, okay, this is what lays in front of me and I'm going about it.
Wow, mark it down on your calendar. Big Z makes his 2001 debut with a long-awaited return to Z Court.
Deals it into Z, who stuffs it home with 2 hands.
The following season, Ilgauskas returned to rookie form, averaging 17.2 points and 7.6 rebounds a game. Despite a losing record, he was just grateful for the opportunity to play.
Sometimes we would lose a game by 20, 25, and obviously you'd be upset, but still kind of deep down, every time I walked off the court, it was a little victory for myself.
Following his All-Star selection in 2003 and the drafting of LeBron James, Ilgauskas' victories only grew.
Fine look from LeBron James.
I felt that with LeBron right away, that Z was the one guy that in his mind, no matter how big LeBron felt or he was or how big he got, Zydrunas would always be a notch above him, and he would always respect him as a Cleveland sports icon.
The culture that we wanted to build, LeBron was still a very young player, and having a veteran leadership, but also an example of, the persistence that we talk about and the, process and professionalism that Zydrunas brought every day, I think was really important for the whole organization.
Zydrunas' persistence paid off. In 2005, Z garnered a second All-Star selection, and in 2007, with LeBron by his side, led Cleveland to its first ever trip to the NBA Finals. Professionally, it was a defining moment for Zydrunas. Personally, his defining moment had already begun.
So when NBA Cares was going to Lithuania and they were asking the players that were involved, like, what are some of your personal, projects there, it was pretty easy to say.
While growing up, Zydrunas would frequently visit an orphanage in his hometown of Kaunas with his father. With each visit, they would bring food and different kinds of clothing for the kids. In 2006, the NBA sponsored a trip back to that very same orphanage. It included conducting a basketball clinic and helping refurbish the orphanage. A short time later, a letter written by a man named Tim Brown made its way to Jennifer Ilgauskas.
It was just a thank you letter of, I adopted 2 girls from this orphanage, and, we're so grateful of everything that you've done, and we just want to say thank you.
As fate would have it, that letter resurfaced a few years later, just when the Ilgauskases needed it most.
We were very much considering adoption, and I remembered that letter. So I sent an email to Tim Brown, and I'm like, would you be at all willing to share your story? And he's like, my wife will call you in 10 minutes.
That phone call laid the foundation for the adoption of 2 brothers, Davidus and Povilas, from the very orphanage that Zydrunas had spent so much time enriching. He was now not only Zydrunas, the NBA player, but Tavali, Lithuanian for dad. In the years that followed, Zydrunas continued to etch his name into the Cavalier record books, setting the all-time team record for rebounding in 2008 and the all-time games played record in 2009, surpassing former teammate and general manager Danny Ferry.
Nash and now enjoy as Big Z comes in and is the all-time Cavalier games played record.
Z spent his final campaign with the Miami Heat.
The last year that he was in Miami, you could just tell things had changed for him, and his physical, your emotional, willingness to put yourself through that every day starts to wane. And so he retired. He went in and said, that he was done. And then he and you're kind of looking at each other like, so now what?
After a short stint as a special assistant to the Cavs general manager, Zydrunas took a well-deserved hiatus.
So for, I would probably say 6 months to a year, a little bit of golf, a little bit of barbecue in the backyard, a lot of beer. But then eventually you do want something. And he looked outside of basketball, but that's what he knows, that's what he loves. So he's like, how do I get myself involved without having all those sacrifices?
With the help of some mutual friends, an opportunity presented itself at Cleveland St. Ignatius High School.
We met, had a great conversation. I offered an opportunity for Z to come down as many days per week as he'd like, kind of thinking he'd come 1 or 2. Lo and behold, he's in the gym before I am. Lo and behold, he's in here every single day. What Z brings to the table is a true sense of giving back. He's not getting paid to come down here. He comes down because he loves these kids. And I think that the kids pick up on that and know that. And I don't think they see enough of that in the world. He's a guy that the kids can look up to.
And in more ways than one. On March 28th, 2014, the young man from Lithuania put his final touch on the Cavaliers franchise.
Please welcome to center court, the big man in the middle, number 11,
It was really emotional. And I remember the boys just sitting there and they're like, are they all here for Tavali? Like, yeah, they're here for Tavali.
Zydrunas Ilgauskas' legacy was forever enshrined in the rafters that night, closing perhaps the biggest chapter of his professional life. But make no mistake, his story is still being written.
For me, it almost brings tears to my eyes because here's a guy that lives and dies Cleveland.
Every city has their culture or their flavor. Coming from Lithuania to Cleveland, while it's miles apart, there is this underlying something that is familiar.
When you look at Z and you look at his career, it's almost like he comes off as an underdog, especially for Cleveland, Ohio. He exemplifies the type of people that live there. Throw out the basketball part. Zydrunas Ilgauskas is such he may get mad at me for saying this, but he's such a sweet human being.
I don't know if it's that Lithuanian culture thing, but when you scratch the hard surface, it's pretty mushy in the inside.
He's better than the salt of the earth when it comes to people. I can't even explain how much I enjoy being around him.